welcome to our first episode of our Not So Simple Lives podcast. Gotta say the lives, plural now. We basically, I feel like we just have to talk about the rebrand really, really quick. Because, I mean, third time's a charm, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, we had a couple of rebrands. If you guys have been following us, you know that. But something feels different about this one. And I feel like it's inspiring because it is kind of like going back to our roots sort of thing. And sometimes I feel like you think like, oh, I need to change or like this isn't working. And like you put all these different coats of paint on something and then it just never works out the way you want it to work out. And sometimes it's like the answer was always right in front of you. You just had to see it and like understand why you branded it that way in the first place.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's what happened to us. We went through all these different transitions, different phases, and then we're like, our journeys, like as everyone's journeys are, have not been simple. So we're like, this just seems better.
Yeah.
This seems more like us. This seems more legit. This is what we wanted to do back in 2020. So here we are with some new technology and on video. I just feel like this is just something so different for us,
It's very different, but it's exciting at the same time.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
I feel like this is what we've always wanted. I feel like we used to talk all the time and be like, oh, you know how cool it would be if we had equipment and we could record sitting next to each other and be on video. And we just never thought it was reality. We thought it was like celebrity stuff and then did some research and we're like, okay, like this is actually pretty doable. It's basically just working with what you have.
Yeah. And back in 2020, I remember talking to you and I'm like, we really should be on video. Like, I feel like a lot of people like to watch rather than listen. There are like people like, I feel like us that we would rather listen than watch. But we're, kind of thinking, okay, what do other people like? Because, everybody likes a little bit of both. But back then, I'm like, we should be on video. We're like, no, we can't do that.
Well, then we tried to. We went on Zoom video a little bit and we would have episodes on there. But Zoom is just not the same. Yeah. I feel like watching something, I think that when people want to watch podcasts, because there's a lot of my friends that say like, oh, I prefer watching podcasts.
Yeah.
Which, like you said, I prefer listening personally. But I think the reason why people like watching podcasts is because they like to see people's energy, like how they are together, whether it's like facial expressions or like body language, nonverbals, all of that stuff. I feel like that's why people like watching podcasts. So yeah, I mean, there's so many podcasts out there now too.
So many.
And I feel like just doing audio, you can't get any traction or anything about doing a podcast with just audio anymore. It has to be like video and you have to, run your social media account, market it and everything. So we're just here. We're doing it. We're on this new path. We're back to our roots, but putting a fresh coat of paint on it once again. And so we're really excited. But life has looked a lot different since 2020, since we started the podcast. I feel like there's been so many ups and downs, and I feel like there's been so much going on in our lives since 2020, and I feel like that's why we changed it to our Not So Simple Lives podcast, because I think that's where the disconnect came in.
Yeah.
First of all, people said the title was too long, which I got it. Like, I understood that. I was like, okay, like, I kind of get it. But then I feel like people didn't really get it, because they're like, our Not So Simple Life. It was like we were all living the same life.
Yeah.
And it didn't really make any sense, because it was like, well, we don't live together. We both live in San Diego.
Yeah.
But that's about it. We've gone on completely separate journeys within the past like year and a half.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I was like, well, if we're going to rebrand it back to our Not So Simple Life, we should do lives instead, because it just makes so much more sense to me.
And even like our little knit of like friends and family that we did, talk about this rebrand about, they were like, out of like all the names, this one is the best. Like this makes the most sense. And it was just funny because I think a lot of people don't know this, but me, like no one would really know this unless they're like really close to us, but we talk a lot through like talk text. Like, well,
Yeah,
we
voice
do like we do
messages.
like voice messages to each other. And I think just one day we were like, I think we were both thinking the same thing, but I don't know who said it first. I think you said it first. I was like, oh my God, yes. And
Yeah.
it was, I think we should go back to our original name.
Well, because I think
You
it
know.
makes more sense. Because,
Yeah.
you know, like we went from Our Not So Simple Life we did for what, 2.5 years? Yes.
Yes.
Almost, no, 3 years. Because
Oh,
we started in
yeah.
2020 and we rebranded in 2023. So 3 years we were Our Not So Simple Life podcast. That's what people knew us as. And then we tried Dream Attraction because we're like, oh, it's more like marketable. It's better branding, you know?
Mhm.
And we were like, okay, like this is going to be it. And then that only lasted a few months because we were like, okay. And then we came back and tried something completely different
Yeah.
with the real reveal. And that didn't work out either.
We were just listening to all the
Yeah.
noise and the fluff
Yeah.
around us, where we were like trying to think of every way to make the podcast better, to elevate it. And that included listening to the outside noise, listening to, you know, people who have never even done a podcast, but that's what their opinions were. And I feel like to a certain extent we are people pleasers.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, let's just try this. Let's try it and see what happens. But now we're just kind of like, you know, we're just doing what we want. And
Right.
that's, you know, that's just that, you know. And I feel like we're actually having a lot more fun and we're
Mhm.
enjoying it this time around, especially with, you know, the new upgrades and everything.
Yeah.
Even though it's a learn in progress for us because it's brand new. A lot more editing and stuff on
Mhm.
our end, but I feel like we're really just kind of in our element right now.
I agree. I think when you're creating content, everything is always subjective. So, one thing that I like, somebody else might not like.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You can't please everybody. It's a like thing where like, you know, you not everyone's always going to like you. And it's
Right.
funny that we should bring this up because it's relevant because I just watched that. Well, I didn't just watch it. Maybe like a month ago I watched that new Another Simple Favor movie with Blake
Mhm.
Lively and Anna Kendrick. And I actually really liked it. I don't know. I really liked it. And two of my friends, I was like, oh, you watched that? And they're like, oh, yeah, I did not like that. And I was like, oh, interesting. And it's like, it's just one of those realization moments where you're like, oh, like, not everybody likes what I like.
Right.
And that's okay. So, like, I feel like a lot of people around us, and we always appreciate the feedback, but I think people are always talking about things we needed to change. It was never like, oh, I really like this about your podcast. You do this great. Keep doing this. It was always, yeah, you got to get rid of this, or you got to change this, or this needs to be better. It was
Mhm.
always like critiques. And I'm not blaming everybody I'm not blaming anybody at all because I think they did it from a good place. I think they were
Right.
genuinely
And
like, oh, like I want to help them get better. But, you know, I think that's what contributed to us being like, oh, we have to keep rebranding because people don't like it. Because people would always only talk about the negatives. They wouldn't talk
Right.
about like, you're doing this great. It would always be like, nah, get rid of this, change this. I
and
hate
we
this.
are very much open to constructive criticism. Like
Mhm.
we can take it. We're like, oh my God, yes, because we are people that we want to be innovative. We want to be able to change and not be scared of change, because for the longest time, like maybe the first 2 years of the podcast, we did not want to change anything. We're like, let's keep it just the way it is because this is how we like it. But we're like, the only way we're going to get better is if we try to improve things that aren't working. And so we really took that to like, let's change everything.
Yeah,
You know?
and we just, I feel like, have gone through so much change since we started the podcast. I feel like I'm a much different person than I was when we first started.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, like, because we're going to do these first couple episodes, like, we're going to talk about, like, kind of how we've changed and evolved since 2020. And I think for me, like, when we first started the podcast in 2020 in the pandemic, I was like, it was Zach's idea. Like, we'll just say it. We used to be we used to be a trio, and he
For
wanted to start a podcast.
Maybe for like 3 episodes.
For
we
like
were,
a
we
yeah,
were a trio.
for like, you know, a few months, and he was like in and out of the equation here.
He's been in many episodes. It just has been a while since he's been in one, but
Yeah.
he's been in a lot of episodes, but he just is not like a main person like we are.
Yeah, and so we were really staying consistent, but I think that he was the one to really be like, let's start a podcast. And I feel like me and you were a little more reserved. And we're
Yeah.
like, oh, that sounds cool. Like, I'd love to do that. But we were just a little bit, I feel like a little nervous.
I think we were
And-
also like, we were nervous, but we at the same time were like, it was the pandemic, so we were also like, yeah, like there's nothing else to do. Let's do it. You know,
I know,
like,
I knew.
let's just do it. And like
Let's just do it.
had no
Okay.
idea what we were getting ourselves into, but like obviously you and I fell in love with it, and
Yeah.
like we're still doing it. We've been through so many hurdles and obstacles throughout this journey, and we're still here. Like we could be asking ourselves like why? Like what?
Well, I think
you know?
so. It was like, we tried to do all these changes and everything. And I think really when it started to click was 2023
Yeah.
with the podcast. I think when we started to do that rebrand, we really thought about the podcast in a different way of like,
Yeah.
okay, we've been kind of stubborn in like our ways, set in our ways. Like, this is what we want to do. Yeah, we did little changes here and there, but we didn't really evolve much, I feel like, in the first 2 years. And then in 2023, we're like, okay, let's think of this from like a brand, from a marketing perspective. But I think we went in the wrong direction of like, every time we would say our not so simple life, people would be like, what?
Right, exactly.
Like, what is that?
We're
Wait,
like,
huh?
never mind.
It was like, yeah, and then people would say the not so simple life. They would just, the name would
Right.
get messed up a lot. And so we were like, okay, let's simplify it to Dream Attraction, because we loved having people on to interview and be like an
Yes.
inspiration to people. And we're going to bring that into this podcast as well. Like, we're definitely like sticking with the inspiration sort of stuff, and entertainment, because we love that. But
yeah,
yeah.
I think when you said like we started thinking the podcast differently in 2023, like we were looking at it more as a like our business. We were
Right.
thinking of it in a more business perspective rather than like we strictly were doing it for fun. Like this was fun for us. We were recording every single week, looking forward to it. Like when we record the episodes, we were like electric because we were so passionate about it. We're like, oh my
Yeah.
god, this is so fun. I love recording every Thursday, like whenever we were doing it. I think it was Thursdays.
Yeah, Thursday
But-
mornings.
So we were strictly doing it for fun. It was a hobby. But then we started taking a turn. We're like, okay, we clearly really love doing this. We're very passionate about it. We totally would love to do this as a career, like as a job.
Yeah.
Kind of getting our foot into that field because we've always kind of been interested in that field of work, entertainment.
Mhm.
We've always kind of done things in that realm. Like if you know, you know. But so that's kind of like when it took a turn, and now like obviously we're really still thinking from that perspective, but I think we got a little smarter about what we need to do now.
Yeah.
But
And I think
even going back to 2020, like
yeah.
going back to our roots, like how you said you were in 2020, like what do you think the difference between your perspective about the podcast was then versus now?
Well, I think, and we're going to do an episode on this, but just to dive into it a little bit, I think going back to school really helped me think about branding in a different way.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately why we stepped away, because we were like, okay, it's just not working. We've got to step away. And sometimes, it's interesting. You read all these stories or these quotes and stuff, and you don't ever think it's like going to apply to you.
Right.
But there's a lot of things that say like, sometimes taking a break or stepping away is a good thing.
Yes.
And I think that that's really the embodiment of our comeback with this podcast is like, when we stepped away, we didn't know what the future was going to look like. When we were stepped away from Dream Attraction, we're like, okay, I'm going back to school. You were doing your own thing, getting into a new field of work. And we're like, I don't really know what the future is with the podcast anymore. And then we stepped away from it for a while and we're like, okay, we really, really miss it.
Yeah.
So that's when you know. I feel like that's when you know if you step away from something for a while and then you come back to it. I think that's when you know you're like, this is for me. And so I think going through all these classes about, communication and, learning how to brand and how big companies brand themselves to a larger audience and all targeting demographics. I think that really made me think every time I would be reading the textbook or watching a video or anything, I'd be thinking about this brand and being like, well, what did I do wrong throughout the first 3.5 years? And how could a comeback, what could be changed to make it better?
Right.
I think I was always thinking in terms of that. And so that's what I think the biggest change from 2020, where I just started this like pandemic, like, we're just going to kind of do this with Zach and see what happens. And we're kind of the backup people to now getting more confidence to being like, no, we're the main show.
Yeah.
And understanding that we can produce numbers without Zach. Sorry,
Right.
I don't know. You're listening to this, but
We love you,
I
Scott.
think it was the confidence we were lacking. And I think
Right.
that doing this for, 5 years now, on and off for the last year and a half, I think that's what we've really gained is the confidence. I mean, when we first started this, we're like, we hate the sound of our voices.
Oh my
So
God,
could we
yeah.
ever even do a podcast? And then from like editing the video or editing the episodes, the audio, posting it, listening to it, I'm like, honestly, my voice is what it is. This is literally my voice. It's not going to change.
Well, and if you think about it, nobody starts off a new project and it's like absolutely perfect. There's nothing I would change. Everybody starts from somewhere, and anyone who's ever made it looks back at one of their first projects and cringes. You're like, oh my God, why did I sound like that?
Yeah.
What are we talking about, kind of thing. And that's, I'm pretty sure, exactly how we look back at our, like, at least our first episode that we ever did.
Oof.
Like, we're like, oh my God, Zach's banging the dishes in the background. He's literally doing dishes, like recording in his AirPods. And we're just all talking and he's just clanking the dishes. But you know what? That's the thing. Everybody has, like you said, different perspectives and what people like and what other people don't like. And some people liked that. Like,
Yeah.
we actually got feedback saying, I liked hearing Zach doing the dishes in the background.
And we thought it was
fun.
so bad. We're like, oh my God, it's so distracting. It's terrible. It's chaotic. But some people are like, that was funny. Like, I loved that episode. And it was so, once again, talking about everything is subjective.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Things that I think are absolutely terrible and we thought were absolutely terrible. Somebody's like, yeah, no, I loved that.
They just thought like we were more, like, it seemed more natural. Like, yeah, like, of course you're going to be doing your dishes while recording a podcast because, you still have a life and you have things to get done. You know what I mean? So
I guess it is, representative of our name.
But like this now, like what we're doing, like this is a more professional setting.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what we were trying to do when we first started. Like that's like the idea we had in our head. So, all the background noises and the things that we're like, oh my God, that's so bad. Like, oh my God, but
yeah.
You look back at it and then you see from that point to now, like how much we've grown and how much, better like audio sounds, now we're on video. And so there's a lot of things that we have definitely improved on that like we're kind of bad at celebrating. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that. Like once you accomplish something, like we're bad at accomplishing, the wins that we do get.
Like celebrating your small wins.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like once you accomplish something or hit a milestone, sometimes we forget to celebrate those moments because we're too busy focused onto the next thing that we're like, okay, I did that. What's next? And it's like, we got to stop for a minute and be like, let's celebrate this moment. And then we're going to make the next goal.
Yeah. And I think that it's just a testament to anything of like, I feel like, starting something new can be really like anxiety ridden. I feel like it can be really intimidating, nerve-wracking. So I think for us to start a podcast and to really put ourselves out there, and I mean, because when you do anything entertainment, you're just setting yourself up to be judged.
Well,
in a
right.
way.
We're
You know,
marketing ourselves at this point
we
because
are.
we're the ones that are running the show. You know, like, yes, we'll have, guest hosts on every once in a while. But, like, you and I are, like, the main thing. We're making the
Yeah.
thing run every single week. So we are our
And
not so
just
simple
that
lives.
in itself is like a really big like transition and a very big milestone for us to
Yes.
hit because of how like, more shy and a little bit more, timid and not wanting to really put ourselves out there like that. The fact that we're able to like sit here in front of a camera using these professional mics and, create this whole new aesthetic, whole new Instagram, whole new look and everything. I think that's a, like just shows our growth in itself.
Yeah.
I think it shows that like okay, like we've gained the confidence and we're still growing. And
Yeah.
it's just a thing of like you just have to start.
Yeah.
And I think it's also like the podcast has inspired me in that because I'm like, if I can do a podcast and start when there's people that are like, who's even listening to them? Or, yeah, okay, you have like 200 followers, everybody starts somewhere. And if you just constantly think about that kind of stuff, like, oh, it's not worth starting it because who's even going to listen, then you'll never start.
Right.
And it can be applied to anything in your life. Like I
Yeah.
just went to freaking Pilates classes last week for the first time and it was really scary. And I didn't go back yet, but I want to keep going because I feel like just starting, I feel like is the hardest part is just to start.
Starting is the hardest part. And it's funny that you like said that because I still to this day, it's not that I don't like I clearly enjoy, recording the episodes, but I don't typically listen back to the episode because Eric's the one that typically does edits the audio. I'm starting to do the video though. So I'll have to listen to a little bit of it,
Mm-hmm.
but I record as if like I think no one's watching it because
Yeah.
I don't see all the analytics. I don't see any of that stuff. So when I record, I'm like, I'm putting it out there, but I don't know who's listening to it,
Yeah. And I feel like it sometimes can be a good way to think about that because then you just shut off all the noise in your head and
Yeah.
everybody's saying like, oh no, this wasn't good. I hate it when you did this or change this. I think it's like when you just focus on like, no, this is what I want to do. It's like you let out that sigh of relief of like, I don't have to please other people. I'm putting this out there and people are going to like this because of our passion shows through.
Yeah.
And because of they enjoy our conversations.
Right.
I think that's the ultimate goal. And I think just, focusing on inspiration, entertainment, and San Diego life because, we worked so hard and to get here and we've stayed here for a while now. I just celebrated, was it 6 years in San Diego?
I was like, speaking of being in San Diego, because for those of you who don't know and are new here, Eric and I are not originally from San Diego. We both are from the Chicagoland area, and we lived there our whole lives pretty much. And we decided to move here. Different times. Eric was first, but maybe you want to share like how that happened and how you got here.
Well, so yeah, I think
Like
just like to talk about, I guess maybe like right up until I moved here, and then maybe just adapting to life in San Diego.
Yeah, I was like, how did you like? Why San Diego? Like, how did you land on San Diego out of everywhere in the United States?
Right.
Why here?
So my mom actually has always wanted to move into San Diego, which I didn't really know until like a few years before we moved here. I didn't really know that she loved it so much. And so she was always planning on retiring here, I guess. And so we were both in these kind of transitions in our life, transitional periods. And we're like, should we just move to San Diego? Like we were selling the house that my mom was selling. My parents were selling their house that I pretty much grew up in. And I had just gone back to school to take 2 classes just to see. And then I got accepted into USD, which is in San Diego, University of San Diego. So everything just started to fall into place. It was one of those things where it was really easy.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to say easy, but it was like the decision was easy because things were just working out. Like we were like, okay, let's see. And then this would work out. And we're like, okay, this would work out. This would work out. But I moved here when I was 23. And I was just like a lost person when I moved here, I
Yeah.
feel. And I didn't realize I was very codependent. I was very codependent. I had a lot of friends in Chicago, and I feel like I'd always have somebody to do something with. Oh, I want to go out to dinner. Let me text this person. And if this person can't, I'll text another person. I had a lot of friends because working in the service industry, and I had high school friends. I just had a
Yeah.
very like tight knit unit around me
Right.
and like a really good support system. So I think moving to San Diego, I was like, okay, San Diego's really beautiful and I would love to live in California. It's really nice weather and I feel lost right now. And so maybe moving will make me feel better.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel like that's the thing of like putting a band aid on a wound that needs stitches because
Right.
you can't distract yourself from what you're going through by doing something else. Yes, it can help,
Yeah.
but you have to go through it and feel it and really understand why you're feeling that way
Yeah.
and really dive deeper. And I wasn't really doing that. I was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to do this now and everything will be better. And I was probably the most depressed. Well, maybe not the most. One of the most depressed I've ever been in my life when I moved to San Diego. And it wasn't because of San Diego, it was because of all of a sudden you have this person that has like a big support system and like all these friends surrounding me. And then you move somewhere where you have no one except for
Mm.
my mom because we're roommates.
Mm.
But it's like starting new. And I think that I had codependency issues, and so
Well, I mean, for anybody, it doesn't matter if you're codependent or not. I feel like that is a really tough transition when you do have like these group of friends and like maybe family too
some
around,
family, yeah.
and you have all that in one space, and then you move somewhere that is complete like super far, and you kind of get isolated from all that.
It was just a lot of change, I think, in my life at once. My life, I didn't really experience a lot of change in my life before this. I think
Yeah.
it was maybe like here and there. Of course, we all go through little changes, whether it's a new job or moving to a new school once you graduate from another one. But it was all like small little changes, and this was like huge life change. And it wasn't even just moving to San Diego. Like there was other big life changes that happened within the same period of time within
Yeah.
the year. So I think that everything at once, like I just felt so unmotivated and I felt so lost. And then it took me a while to really like plant my feet and be like, okay, I'm here now. And I feel like I didn't really gain my confidence back until I was like, I want to say it was like summer of 2022 is when
Mm-hmm.
I really started feeling confident again. And so honestly, it took me 3 years of trying to get out of this rut. And it sounds like a
Yeah.
long time. And I made really good strides, but I think that I was stuck in this rut until 2022. And then I've kept growing since then, which I've really appreciated, because we're kind of like getting to the end of our 20s now. So I think for me, 20s and just moving to San Diego has just taught me to be confident and to love myself.
Yeah, and
And I think that that was the hardest thing for me because I was always trying to please other people.
yeah, and I think like also you learn to be very independent as well. And that's hard for a lot of people, like anyone, doesn't matter like who you are, like being super independent and doing things on your own, like a lot of the majority of the time, I feel like it's incredibly hard to do because it's like, you know, most things you want to at least have one person with to go do something. It could be
It's
anything.
ideal. You do really want to have like at least one other person to experience something with because sometimes it's just not as fun, but other times the other person can maybe ruin the experience.
It depends on
So,
who you have around, but
right.
I feel like you have mastered being independent to like obviously a healthy extent, to like more than the average person, but I feel like that's something like a lot of people would like idolize about you because you're so independent, which makes you also very confident.
Yeah, I
You
think I'm like I definitely know a lot of people that are more independent than me. I
you're
still struggle with it sometimes, but
yeah.
I definitely am much better than what I was. And so that's what we used to say with the podcast is like if I'm comparing me to me at the start of this podcast journey, which was 2020, I just see so much more independence, so much more confidence. Like I look back at that
Yeah.
person and the pictures and I'm like, you were just going through it. And we were going through a pandemic. Things
Yeah.
were hard. So I don't fault myself. I don't blame myself. Sometimes I forget that the world was on
No.
lockdown for like a year and a
You
half.
definitely
And
have to
so,
you have to definitely give yourself some grace during that time as
yeah,
well. Like you got to think of everything you were going through and whether it was easy or hard. Like compare like you're always I feel like you're always striving to be a better version of yourself. And I feel like we both are from those points. Like we are both a lot better version of ourselves now than we were then. But we have to give our past selves during that time, just give them some grace because
totally.
it was hard, you know?
It was hard and we can't be too hard on ourselves because, our feelings are valid. What we're going through is completely valid or what
Yeah.
we were going through. But you could just look back and be like, I don't want to be that person anymore.
Yeah.
Here's how I'm going to change and become a more confident version of myself. And, I went from being someone that back in like 2020, I could barely even like, well, maybe not 2020, I was getting a little better, but, maybe 2019, I couldn't even barely go to the grocery store by myself. To a
Right.
few months ago, I just went on a solo trip by myself.
Yes.
So it's like you just have to look back at yourself and be like, how can I become a better version of me in the
Yeah.
past instead of trying to compare yourself to another person?
Right.
Because some of us are never gonna look like that. We're
No.
never gonna be that person. We're never gonna be able to achieve what another person achieves. We just have to outdo ourselves
Right.
yesterday, and keep going, just set some goals for yourself and keep trying to accomplish them and achieve them. And I think that's the biggest thing I could take away from who I was back in 2020 to who I am now. I feel like I always lacked confidence in my abilities too, of like, oh, I don't know, that maybe might be too much for me. I don't know if I'll be able to do that. To being like, no, yeah, it's gonna be hard, but you're gonna do it.
Yeah.
Because that's what you just have to say. I look in the mirror, I'm like, yeah, you're gonna do that.
Yeah.
Because if I quit after everything in my life that was hard, I would have never been anywhere. I would have literally
Right.
been staying in the same exact place. And being stagnant is more scary than taking the risk to me.
Yes.
Because when I get stagnant for too long, I start to get antsy. I start to get unhappy. I'm like, what's next? Like, I'm ready for what's next. And I feel like sometimes also just taking time to slow down and appreciate your life and appreciate the things you have achieved
Yeah.
and appreciate the journey. Because sometimes when you get to the destination, you're like, oh, like I wish I would have just soaked then in a little bit more. And I feel like I always thought of that when I went back to school and I'd be on campus, like studying. I'd be like, I have
Yeah.
like 3 papers due, like in a week. But you know what? Look at where I am. It's just all about gratitude.
Yeah.
So it's all about being grateful. It's about being grateful for everything you have, even if it's for the small things. So I think after this conversation, I'm like, I'm a completely like
No.
different person than who I was in 2020. Like
That's what I'm
I didn't really
saying.
practice gratitude back then. I
Mm-mm.
didn't really know who I was. I lacked confidence. I was insecure. I was codependent. And I'm not trying to, damn, I'm really throwing shade at myself now. But
No, seriously,
know-
I mean, like, we haven't talked about mine yet. We will next episode.
next time.
But I literally had all the things you just named. I'm like, yes, me too. All of them. Like everything. Like we were, and it's so funny because it's so ironic because we were in that state of mind going through
Mhm.
these things, but at the same time, we're like, let's start a podcast.
Let's just do it.
What, like, if you
In a weird low point in our lives, we're like, let's start a podcast.
let's just do it. And it's like,
yeah.
you wouldn't think, people that are in this type of stage in their lives going through all these things would make that type of decision. You know what I mean?
But that's why I feel like Zach needed to be that person to motivate us to get
yeah.
there. We would have never started this, just me and you.
No, we would have
We
not.
would have not, and that's why some people like are there for a reason in your life. Not like he's not saying that he was there for just that sole reason, but
Right.
some people you need a bit of a push, and me and you are those people that need a bit of a push. And so I'm excited to hear your journey next time in a few
Yeah.
days. We are doing bi-weekly episodes now. So you'll be able to hear us twice a week now instead of once a week.
I was like, if one's not enough, you'll
Right.
get another one.
Mondays and Thursdays.
Yeah.
We'll be on anytime. Yeah. You can listen to us anytime. But I was gonna say any platform. Apple, Spotify, what are the other ones? Those are
We'll
the big
also be on
ones.
YouTube.
YouTube.
You can watch us on video as well.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Comments. Let us know how different you are from when you were in 2020. You know, do you relate to some of the qualities that I have been dealing with, or are you in that transitional period right now of your lives? Like, we'd love to have these conversations with you guys. And, you know, follow our Instagram at Our Not So Simple Lives Pod. And yeah, I think that
just
covers it.
Make sure to keep up with us because
Keep up with us.
we are most active on our Instagram page. So if you want to, you know, catch up and make sure you're up to date with us, you know, follow our Instagram
Yeah,
page.
we're so excited. This is like a new journey, so we're excited. Thank you guys for coming along with us on this journey. I am really excited to see where this leads to.